Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true first-hand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. For many of us who embark into the world of plant medicine, we may come from a background of addiction challenges or substance abuse, in which in order to heal our addictions, we must swing the polarity to that of complete sobriety for a period of time. For some of us, that period may be the remainder of our lives, and for others, that period may be a series of months or years. However, it's clear to see that one size does not fit all. And with that being said, I truly believe that as human beings, change is the only constant within our lives. As such, for many people who have struggled with addiction in their life, they are finding their way either back to psychedelics or finding their way to them for the first time to continue their healing process. And although organizations such as AA or NA are firmly against this idea, it is interesting to discover that AA, for one, was actually created after Bill Wilson's experience with LSD, among other plant medicines. And in today's episode, I dive in with a dear soul brother of mine whose journey has been exactly what I have stated in this intro. From full-blown addiction stemming from trauma and other challenges in his early life, to spending over 20 years in AA, and that foundation giving him the strength to achieve incredible things in his life, to then moving past the identity of someone who is sober to expand back into the realm of conscious plant medicine consumption and more. It's safe to say that he has had a wild and beautiful journey. And for any of you who have loved ones who have struggled with addiction, I promise you this episode is going to open up more and more aspects to how to support these individuals and what some options are for those in this space. So without further ado, please help me in welcoming my man Luke Story to the show. Luke Story, my man, I am super excited to be here with you today. We just wrapped up an amazing show on your show, and we're doing a double header today. It's been amazing. I just want to tune in. How you doing today, brother?
I'm doing great now. I have an enlightening curiosity around cannabis as a result of our conversation, of course. So yeah, I'm doing great. I always have a good time when I'm recording my podcast, and it's always really fun to do like double headers where we turn the mics around, so to speak, because it's so much easier to be the one who is answering questions than it is asking them.
I find that too.
Yeah, because then it's just like, I'm not in charge here, right? Yeah. It's like, I don't have to have that masculine container, like, where's this going, and time constraints and all that. I'm just like, free flowing, whatever you want to talk about. I'll wind me up and I'll go.
Yeah, man, I love swap casting. It's the best. It's like, I'll show you yours, you show me mine. It's the same kind of thing, just
I like that
grade school.
Swap casting. That's good. That's good. I'm gonna steal that.
Well, dude, we're going to dive into a lot of different aspects of your journey and things like that. But, to kind of give some context and things like that, I'd love if you could share a little bit about your journey because, typically what I ask people to begin with is how they got introduced to psychedelics. And I will ask you that, right? We'll definitely dive into how you first got introduced. But, your journey is one that's so beautiful because there's so many people out there that have had challenges with other substances in the past, have gone to sobriety, and have felt at a certain point like, I kind of feel like involving psychedelic medicines would not inhibit my sobriety. And I know that's been your journey as well. So I'd love if you could share some of that because I imagine many listeners, either themselves or they know someone who maybe is at that crossroads right now. And I imagine you may be able to provide some really useful info about how you traverse that because I imagine that it'd be very easy to fall back into something, right? And I imagine anyone listening who resonates with that will be worried about that. So how did that happen for you, man? How'd you start? How'd you, then reintroduce plants? Tell me everything, man.
Yeah, it's such a fun topic for me, I think, because it's been such an incredible discovery as someone who was so deeply committed to my recovery and programs of recovery, and my community and outer community was always sober people for 22 years. And that was necessary, right? It's like I had to build an ecosystem that was supportive of a life of abstinence from mind-altering substances because they had been so problematic for me. And so the idea of finding the intersection of plant medicines and psychedelics and recovery was fascinating to me and continues to be fascinating to me because you go through this process or I went through this process as someone who considered myself sober, right? And so if someone said, "Hey, do you want a beer?" I'm like, "Oh, no, I don't drink. I'm sober. I'm a recovering alcoholic, recovering addict, etc." And because of my desire to preserve my life, that identification was really important and it was really healthy to the point where in the beginning I was counting hours, when I first checked into rehab in 1997, 27 years ago. And, it was like minute by minute, then hour by hour, then day by day. And by the time I checked out of there, I had, I think, 28 days sober, which was just absolutely unfathomable for me. That was an eternity, right? And then you get 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and you go to meetings and you often identify if you have less than 30 days or who has 90 days. People raise their hands. And so the idea of counting time was really valuable because the more time one would accrue in sobriety, the more you covet it and value it, right? It's like, holy shit, I'm sober 6 months. A guy like me, like that is not possible. And the next thing you know, it's 5 years and 10 years. And then that becomes useful because if you approach it from a place of gratitude, knowing that you weren't the one responsible for your miraculous recovery, you were just a willing participant because you humbled yourself and you followed some spiritual principles. But at a certain point, it also can become, for some of us, an identity to which we're attached, right? Like, I'm 20 years sober. There's kind of a badge of honor, a bit of pride that can come with it. But I think for most people, and for me, it was a healthy thing. It's like, I go, God damn, man, I'm 20 years sober. And yeah, it's not me alone that did it, but I participated in that. And there were many opportunities where I could have lost my sobriety, and I chose not to. I made different decisions. I changed my life. I changed my friends, what I do for a living, everything about me, externally, and most importantly, internally. I live by a different set of morals, codes, values than I used to. So I was very much a transformed man by the time I was 22 years sober, and had done a lot of work onto India and, studied meditation and energy work and done all the biohacking and all the healing and a lot of different meditative practices and all kinds of different therapy and EMDR and just, and I was doing pretty well. But there were areas in my life, specifically around relationships, romantic relationships, that I was extremely dysfunctional. And I could not crack the code of codependency, love avoidance, sex addiction, like all these issues around like intimacy and relating to people. And it caused me a lot of turmoil. So I sought out a lot of help and started reading books about these other, and around money, debt, and just like still dysfunctional in some really vital categories of life. And I was doing my podcast starting in 2016. And in the course of interviewing people about my podcast, I started meeting people that started talking about this ayahuasca. And I'd never heard of it. And I remember hearing about one guy who was in a recovery program that I was in. And there was like rumors about him that he went to Brazil and drank ayahuasca, and he ain't sober now. It's like he lost his sobriety, or as they say in recovery, he went out.
Hey, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you all know that the doors are officially open for the Conscious Cannabis Collective. And as such, this is the last week you can sign up and receive all of the bonuses we're currently including. This is the last time I will be personally onboarding those of you who sign up with a complimentary one-on-one session, and you'll have the ability to get the Grow with Cannabis course for free during this limited time. For more info on how you can take advantage of this offer, head down to the show notes for this episode and secure your spot today, as we only have so many spots left and they are filling up quickly. Now back to the show.
we're like, yeah, he went out, he did this ayahuasca. And I thought, oh man. And I kind of judged the guy, I was like, dude, you can't do psychedelics. You're sober, right? That was a few years before that. Then I started hearing this ayahuasca word again, people I interviewed. And then I interviewed someone. Actually, I met someone at an event in New York. I hadn't interviewed them yet. And she was telling me a story about her co-founder. They formed a ayahuasca retreat center, and her co-founder had been an addict like me, like a bona fide, card-holding addict, the real deal, not someone that went through a rough patch, like shooting that Dilaudid kind of guy, Yeah. And he had gone and worked with Iboga and was struck sober after one ceremony and never used again, and never went to rehab, never went to AA or anything like that. He was just like living his best life now. And I thought, what? This makes no sense. If you are a drug addict, the answer that I found was stop doing drugs.
Yeah, abstinence.
Complete abstinence, which is the model of, the 12-step movement is wisely based on complete abstinence. And I believe that's really important based on my past of the slippery slope, as we talked about on your podcast, of the gateway, what for me was a gateway drug of cannabis, not for all, obviously, but for me it certainly was. And so I heard about this guy, and then I would just start meeting people that were talking about people that had been addicts that were now sober from using psychedelics. And I'm like, what? It just made no sense to me, but I knew these people weren't lying. And I knew that I had issues in my life, not, addiction per se, but I had issues that I could not overcome, no matter how many different type of 12-step groups I went to, or what kind of therapy I did, or how much I meditated, or how fit I got, or how healthy I ate, how well I slept. It's just like I'm running into these patterns that were not only so painful and destructive for my life, but of course for the women with whom I was attempting to have a relationship of whatever type, right? It was just like a mess. So you have a guy who's like successful in all metrics of life, has great recovery. I'm helping other people in recovery. I've learned how to be of service. I'm no longer a selfish, rapacious person. I'm a giving, altruistic person, very conscious. I have a relationship with God. Yet if you look at a couple parts of my life, it's like, it's a train wreck, So anyway, it's hard to tell these stories without really, going on and on,
No,
but
it's amazing.
It's just such a mind-blowing thing. So I get an invite to go to Costa Rica and do an ayahuasca retreat. And I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know. Like, will I be sober if I do that? I'm a sober guy. Like, Luke, remember, you do not do drugs. Those are drugs. I don't care if you call it medicine or whatever you call it. If you get high, you got high. Like, you can't do that. So this mental battle went on for about 6 months, but there was just this still small voice within, this knowing, this intuition that I could not quiet. And it wasn't, I know the difference between like a craving or a compulsion or an excuse, rationalization, self-deception. I was pretty skilled at determining when I was fooling myself, right? Because there was now a witness observer present in my life from all of these years of meditation. So it's like, I kind of know when I'm tricking myself into something. And it wasn't that. It was like my soul, now I see, my higher self kind of calling me forward to take a real leap. I was leaning in maybe 80% to a yes, but still terrified because I don't know what this means to my recovery. And I did an interview with this guy named Paul Selig, who's a channel.
I love Paul Selig.
We were in New York City. And I thought, I'm going to ask him if he can ask his guides. And so during the interview, I said, no pressure. If this doesn't feel appropriate to you, I understand. But I'm curious, would you ask your guides about the prospect of me going and working with this ayahuasca? And he kind of paused for a moment. It's on one of my podcast episodes, the whole exchange. He paused for a moment and he's like, okay. And he goes in and does his thing and he comes out and essentially says, it would be completely safe for you and your sobriety. This is his guides talking, right? If you believe in such things. I personally do.
I definitely do,
in some cases, not all cases.
Yeah,
with him, I do. And so the message basically from the guides was you'd be completely safe. It would be helpful to you, but you can also complete your mission without doing that. So it's like it's fine if you do, fine if you don't kind of thing. And I was like, green light, we're in. Booked it. I was like, that's all I needed to hear. It was just something I just wanted to feel safe. I wanted someone other than me to go, you're okay if you do this. So that's part one. Actually, that's part one. Part zero is when I was 8 or 9 years old, I started doing drugs and became quickly addicted. And then when I was about maybe 16 or 17, LSD and mushrooms started to become available to me. And I knew about them from listening to Cheech and Chong records when I was a kid and, reading stories about Jimi Hendrix and all this, right? So it was like there was this allure to try every drug that was available to me. And those started to pop up. And so I used to do a lot of acid and mushrooms. And to me, I would attempt to use those drugs to numb the pain of being in my experience, like I did alcohol and opiates and cocaine and all those things. They were just another one of those drugs. But what would happen is I would be faced with myself when I would use LSD or mushrooms. And so I would have to use, drink a lot of alcohol, smoke a bunch of cannabis, do downers. I would have to numb the experience of the psychedelics because it got too real. I would get so uncomfortable because my traumas, I didn't know this at the time, but my traumas would bubble to the surface. And so I would take psychedelics, from 16 to 26, 10 years, quite a lot, and go to Dead shows and things like that and try to party. And it would be a great idea. Let's do a bunch of acid. Yeah. And then we'd all take acid. And then you'd end up in a fucked up situation, man, with like dark people. I mean, just gnarly. Well, I got one story for you.
Dude,
and then,
please.
So we go to this festival. I think it was the Further Festival out in San Bernardino. We take a bunch of acid. Thing is with acid too, that I've never learned was that it lasts much longer than the thing you're going to do.
Oh, yeah. Dude.
Right?
Oh, 100%.
So I take acid like when you're walking in the gate of the concert, you hand your ticket and then you dose and it's like, oh, the concert's only 90 minutes and the acid trip is 9 hours, So it's one of those. We took a couple hits of acid. We're driving home. Our friend Willie was our trumpet player in our band and he loved acid and he drove us home on acid. And then we got the hankering for like some heroin or some crack. And so we stop in downtown LA and we're on acid, driving around in the hood, just looking for gangbangers and just yelling like Chiva, Chiva, which is the Mexican term for street heroin. And we couldn't get any. I mean, talk about depressing. This is like when the alcohol's worn off and you're tripping and you're like in a, like gang neighborhood, there's just homelessness, and just low energy, right? Low vibration, situation there. Couldn't get any. So we stop in Hollywood where we know we can get crack all night long. We get crack. We're still on acid. The alcohol's wearing off. We go back to my apartment and we didn't have a glass pipe, which is necessary to smoke crack for those that haven't done it. I don't recommend that you do. So Willie, who is this beautiful musician, just so talented. He played with the Memphis Horns. He played with the blues legend Albert King. I mean, he was like just high-level musician. And we ended up smoking the crack on acid out of his mouthpiece for his trumpet.
Wow.
It's like, oh, how sad, man. I mean, right now it's just like, oh, that's so low, So that's the way I used psychedelics when I was treating them like every other drug. Yeah. So of course, fast forward 22 years later, I'm like, what? I've already used psychedelics. That shit is dark and it's a drug and it's going to make me want to drink alcohol and numb myself because the reality that it brings forth is too painful. But at 22 years sober, my reality wasn't very painful. I got these relationship problems and things as I described, but there's nothing I'm trying to run from. I spent 22 years facing myself head on all day, every day in complete sobriety, right? So I say yes to this retreat. And I felt very safe in my decision because I had a high degree of trust in myself, but there was still the reconciliation of identity because I'm sober. Like I call myself a sober person. I'm in recovery. I sponsor other guys. And now they're like, where are you going? You're like our go-to guy. And I'm like, I'm not recommending this for you yet. Although when I came back, I did get a few of my guys. I didn't get them, but I said, hey, this is my experience. And many of them have gone on to very successfully work with medicine within recovery. So to truncate the whole story, because I mean, it could just go on for 10 hours. The coolest moment was this. So I'm there and I've really reconciled that I'm going to have to find a different identity after this experience. And I don't know if that identity can still be called sober in the way that I've thought about it with a capital S. It's going to be different. I don't know what's going to happen. But one thing that I was quite certain of is that I wasn't going to be triggered back into like drinking alcohol and doing all the things. I was like, I'm confident enough in my commitment to sobriety and to just what to me equals life, right?
Yeah,
and just
100%.
The gratitude I have to my creator for freeing me from those addictions. It's like, I'm never going to slap that in the face. I'm not going to throw that away because I'm curious about seeing visuals. I've seen enough visuals, you know, it's like, it's not a curiosity. Like, what's it like to hallucinate?
Yeah.
Like, been there, done that a million times. It's about how can I commune in a deeper and more meaningful way with God? How can I pray in a different way? Really, right? Because I've been praying in all the ways that I could find. And so the first night of ceremony, they gave me some hape, knocked me on my ass. I'd never had it.
That'll happen.
But it was part of the routine. So I was like, hey, you know, when in Rome. But it really stilled my mind, you know. It really like brought me to the 0 point of focus. And so I had the hape, then they served the first cup, and I'll never ever forget this, brother. It was so beautiful. I'm sitting on my mat, and I'm just like, Luke, man, there's no turning back. You just did some different ass shit. Your recovery is going to be different. I don't know what this looks like. Do you go to meetings now? You know what I'm saying? It's like, this is uncharted territory for me and probably for many people in my, 22 years. I'm very committed to this. So anyway, first cup, I'm not feeling anything other than just like, wow, I feel very centered, very calm. I'm in a deep meditation. Ding, 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 second cup. I'm like, oh shit, here we go. Drink the second cup of that nasty ass licorice syrup. God bless ayahuasca.
Yeah,
I don't need to,
That's the tax.
Don't
You
mean
gotta
to
deal with the taste to
don't
get
mean to
by it,
denigrate it, but
Yeah.
the good thing is it would never be habit forming because it's hard to get down.
Yeah, that's
Anyway,
part of it.
I drink the second cup, and I'm sitting there going, "Wow, man, I have not altered my mind, at least that dramatically, in 22 years, man. That's a long ass time. It's a long ass time to just be stone cold sober 24/7, right?" And I drink the second cup, and I'm sitting there meditating. The hape's got my mind just like a diamond, and I'm just waiting for anything that's different. Right? I'm just like, what's this going to be like? Like, how's it going to come on? I'm just so curious. And, as many people listening will know, it's like my eyes were closed, and I'm just like, every breath I'm taking, I'm just waiting for something different. And man, it hit me when it came on so fast. And so it went from like, oh, a couple colors to like entity spaceship, 0 to 60,
Yeah.
And I remember sitting there just going, oh my God. I instantly felt that I was in the presence of God, in such a beautiful way. And I felt so safe. And I asked myself or God a question. It's a really, really important question. As it's coming on, it's so strong. I said, oh shit, man. I said, am I still sober? And what I heard was, you have never been more sober in your entire life than you are right now. And I started laughing my ass off, dude, because I got it. What that meant was so profound, because the intellect had subsided, the egoic structure, the persona, all of that was just pushed to the side. And there was a true experience of unity between all of the dimensions of myself and my body, mind, and spirit and God. Because I'd read about non-duality, understand it as a concept. In some meditations, definitely had gone into kind of a quantum space of stillness where I would dissolve from the waveform into the sea and that kind of thing, right? But this was like, whoa, it's not the void, it's like the totality, right? It's like not that there's nothingness, it's there's everythingness.
Yeah.
And so that answer that I got essentially helped me to feel so safe and held by God in that moment and by the facilitation and the whole, grid that was being created. But more than anything, it was so empowering in the level of trust in myself that it's like, you don't need to label yourself a sober person anymore. It's like laughable. Not that I don't have reverence and gratitude for that, because I still consider myself sober.
Yeah.
Which is going to be insane to anyone in recovery listening, right? Based on the amount of medicine I've done since that year, 2017, I think. Done a lot of journeying since then, which we can talk about. But it was like, oh no, this is my life now. I don't need to report to a sponsor. I don't need to report to my little group on Tuesday nights in the church basement. It's like, God bless all of that. But this is me now. This is my life now. This is an opportunity for me to take responsibility for the full expression of my humanity and to fully, what I thought I'd been surrendering for all those years, but this is a different level of surrender. This is like, whoa. I'm surrendering into a multi-dimensional experience that has gifts that I could have never even imagined possible, And so the first 2 nights, I was in absolute ecstasy and bliss and just mostly just laughing my ass off. I felt so liberated, so free, man, because I'm like, you've done it, dude. You arrived to the point where you have fortified your character, your morality, your understanding of spiritual principles. You've embodied this stuff for long enough. Now it's time for you to just experience what it's like to be that man.
Yeah.
Right? And, and then on subsequent nights, there was some very, very deep work and realizations and things that I wrote in my journal and things like that just absolutely transformed my life that we can talk about. But what I have come to understand, because it seems to be such a contradictory experience of like, you were an addict, therefore complete abstinence is the proven path. I mean, in history as we know it, like that's the way. If you're a drunk or a junkie or whatever, like you quit doing all drugs, cannabis, everything. And that is definitely valid because that's what I did and that's what worked. Yet I started to remember some of the research that I'd done into the origin of the 12 steps and the Alcoholics Anonymous movement, right? And I was very big into the literature. I studied it for years. I mean, like, I'm talking about looking up every word in those books in a dictionary multiple times. I created my own dictionaries of every word in the 12-step literature. I mean, going back to the pre-origins of the origins of that movement, because I was so fascinated by what it had done for my life. It's like, what is this? How does this work? Right? It's like, you got to be kidding me. Yeah. Not only because of its ability to render one sober who would have found no other way to do that, but because what sobriety is about changing your character. And through the application of those spiritual principles and the way that they're codified, the purpose of the 12 steps is to have an evolution or change of character that brings you in touch with your essence and the integrity of who you really are as a person and your true values and morals and your relationship with God. And when that's done or in process, because of course it's always a process, then the need for drugs and alcohol as an anesthesia is not necessary. So it's like we come into a recovery program or rehab, which I thought like, oh, drugs and alcohol are my problem. I got to get rid of that. And I'm going to be singing Kumbaya. And then you realize like, oh shit, I'm in more pain now and I have more problems in some cases now and in some areas of life, as I said, than I did when I was on drugs. So how do you piece that together? Well, it's that my character had changed. I was a completely different person as a result of this program, and it's based on abstinence. Well, if you look back in the history of that, which this gets super wild, for the, many people will know this if they're in recovery and some won't. Before they had 12-step meetings, there was a group called the Oxford Group, and this was a non-denominational sort of metaphysical/Christian group, right? And they would get people sober just by introducing them to a higher power. And some of those members kind of defected and ended up meeting this guy, Bill Wilson, who was the co-founder of AA. And so a lot of the principles in the steps kind of come out of that, and they all originate sort of in Christianity, and God knows what other kind of esoteric teachings way back, right? But just principles like being of service to other people, being honest, having humility, making amends when you've harmed people, personal inventory, self-inquiry, prayer, meditation, surrendering and devoting your life to a higher power. These are all the teachings that are embodied in the 12 steps, but of course don't originate. But the way they were put together was out of these Oxford groups, and people would have these miraculous sort of conversions, these kind of religious conversion experiences, and these drunks on the street would get sober. So this guy, Bill Wilson, was a failed stockbroker, like a rock bottom alcoholic, just drooling on the street kind of alky. It's back in the day, if you ended up like in a recovery program, like you are really bad.
Yeah, because the toleration for alcohol.
Yeah, because it was just normal.
More,
yeah. Like once I went to a meeting in Belfast, Ireland, and I walked in there and I was like, oh my God, I am a pussy. Like these people.
I am not on their level.
Yeah. Well, I'm like, to consider yourself an alcoholic in Ireland, where it's like normal, like you got to be really low bottom. And it was a beautiful meeting because everyone was so committed, But anyway, I digress. So going back to the research here. So I started remembering after I worked with ayahuasca and even over the years since, that when Bill Wilson got sober, the co-founder of AA, and this story is in the main text of Alcoholics Anonymous. People call it the big book, but the name of the book is just Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a big blue book. And in the first 164 pages of the book is where kind of the meat of it is. And the first part of the book is his story about how he was a drunk and all this shit that happened to him, kind of his war stories, And then part of that story is that he checks himself into Towns Hospital in New York City. And in this hospital, they administer something called the belladonna treatment. And belladonna is LSD. A plant medicine. No, it's a plant medicine.
Gotcha.
Yeah, belladonna is a plant medicine. It's not technically a psychedelic. I've looked it up. I forget what they call it, but it's I don't know, something like a dissociative or something of this nature. So it was they would use this cocktail called the belladonna treatment, and it would also have some pharmaceutical sedatives, but it was a plant medicine with some other downers in it, ostensibly to get people through the DTs when they were checked into a mental hospital with a bad case of alcoholism. So Bill Wilson is administered this medicine, and I thought originally in my research that he had his famous, what he called his white light experience, which was this spiritual awakening that he had that rendered him sober from that day till the day he died, 20-something years later. In fact, as far as, the historians of that lineage can lead me, it wasn't the day he took that medicine. It was a day or two later that he had gone through the DTs, or at least was in the process of going through the DTs, but he had been administered that plant medicine, this belladonna. And then he has this white light experience where he describes in that book how it was like a wind blew through the room and it filled with white light, and he felt the presence of God. And it was so impactful that he was just instantly cured of his addiction to alcohol. And then, of course, he went on to meet this other guy named Dr. Bob out in Akron, Ohio. And as fate would have it, he felt like he wanted to drink. He was starting to get antsy. So he went into this hotel lobby and looked through the phone book and called a local church. And the person that answered the phone at the local church, he said to that person, I'm a drunk. I'm sober a couple days or however long it was. And I think I need to talk to another drunk. And he just had this intuition. So he finds this guy, Dr. Bob, who was the town drunk, had been a successful, reputable doctor, and now was just a basket case. He goes and has a meeting with that guy and tells him his story of how he was a drunk and he had this white light experience and now he was sober. Started talking to that guy got sober. The two of them started talking to other drunks. And then you have this 12-step movement. I mean, there's more to the story, but you have this 12-step movement that now is worldwide and has saved the lives of millions and millions of people in all the different permutations of 12 steps as you apply it to the different struggles that you have in your life, right? Whether it's codependency or sex addiction or whatever. So I looked back and I was like, wow, that's really interesting. So this guy takes a plant medicine, then has a spiritual experience, and the whole program of abstinence is based on non-abstinence.
Yeah.
Right? Then fast forward, and then I'll let you answer your second question 45 minutes in.
This is awesome, dude.
Then I learned sometime later in my research, because I'm writing a book right now. It's not about this, but I'm going to write another book about this specific topic, the intersection of psychedelics and recovery, because I think it's so important for us to start to evolve into a new model, right? And I'm not the first one to realize this, but of course I'm one with subjective experience. So Bill Wilson was known to be a womanizer. He had a lot of problems in, the sex and relationships and fidelity and stuff, even though he was sober and helping all these people, founded this organization. And he was known to suffer from depression well into 20 years of sobriety. So it's like, well, God, I mean, these steps are so powerful. You have this code of ethics and principles that you live by, and they make you an upstanding member of society and a better parent and a better husband. And, you're a better person and you're happier and you have a relationship with God. You're a spiritual person and therefore you don't feel the need to drink. And it makes perfect sense. So why was he depressed 20 something years into it? So in his effort to find a solution to his depression, he somehow hooks up with Aldous Huxley and goes to the Veterans Administration Hospital in West LA, and on, I think, 2 different occasions does LSD therapy. And reported back, and this is in writing, you can find this in the research, that his depression was cured. And that he, for the first time, became, I think the way he described it is like free of his ego, And so he went back to the other elders and leaders in Alcoholics Anonymous and was very enthusiastic about integrating LSD. This would have been the early 60s, like pre-hippie movement, right? Yeah. It's when it was still being used therapeutically before it kind of leaked out into the pop culture. So it was still like a medicine. Probably not even illegal yet at this point.
I don't think it became illegal until later on in the 60s.
Yeah. So, so it was above board, but still he went to his AA councils and said, hey, my ego's gone and my depression's gone. This is amazing. I really know God now. And they weren't having it, understandably. Of course. So, but he wanted to really make LSD a part of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I think, man, imagine how great it could have been. Maybe, I don't know. It might have been a train wreck.
Well, imagine if you found ayahuasca,
Totally.
Shit.
So I say all that to say, okay, you have this beautiful program that saved my life, for which I have so much gratitude. I mean, who I am as a man, any good part of me is owed with a bow of reverence to the teachings of the 12 steps, period, hands down. It's who I am. It's what I am. It's my entire relationship with other people, with life, with everything I do is based on my adherence to those principles. And if I'm suffering, it's because I've fallen out of line in my integrity and my commitment to that value system. So while I owe everything to it, and I still consider myself, as I said, someone sober, I also realize that there's a really important principle in the 12 steps, which is open-mindedness, which is very prevalent in the second of the 12 steps. Step 2 is about open-mindedness, where you come to believe that a power greater than yourself can restore you to sanity. Coming to believe is a process of awakening. It's a process of opening your awareness, letting go of preconceived ideas, not only being open to new ideas, but maybe even more importantly, being willing to discard old ideas that no longer serve you or ideas that have proven themselves to be fallacious. So if we're really going to practice open-mindedness and we're going to look at comprehensive recovery, where you're recovering in your sexuality, in your finances, in your vocation, and in your physical sobriety, emotional sobriety, right? Emotional regulation, healing your trauma, facing and dealing with your PTSD, like full recovery, bringing back to you in your essence. I don't know if there's a better way to do it, right? And so it's not that much of a departure between having a spiritual experience that results in sobriety, which is the purpose of the 12 steps, is to induce a spiritual experience. In fact, man, you ask me about this shit, dude, I get excited,
I love
dude.
It, bro. I'm like, send it, dude.
Now check it. Okay, so there's one more thing, and I swear, I'll shut up. So when Bill Wilson had that post belladonna plant medicine experience in the treatment center, which was really a sanitarium at that point. They didn't have like rehabs. They were mental hospitals. So he has this experience. What he wanted to do, and this is his own writing, he wanted to find a way to produce a wholesale transferable experience like he had to other people, but he knew that he couldn't induce it, right? Through like faith healing or something. And that's where eventually he was downloaded the 12 steps as we know them. And the express purpose of reading about these principles and applying them to your life, and one alcoholic helping another, that kind of thing, the meetings, all of that construct, the sole purpose of it is to induce and produce a spiritual experience that renders you sober, because you now have access to the power of God beyond your own limited willpower as an individual. You now have the will of God on your side because you've surrendered your will to God, right? So now you've joined forces, Wonder Twin powers activate. You and God are now in a partnership, in a relationship, in a communion wherein you can do things like not drink that yesterday you had no control over, right? So if he had this spiritual experience having something to do with this medicine, and then developed this teaching program to produce that, then it would make sense if there are other ways to have a similar white light peak experience like he did, where you experience a much higher level of consciousness than you're used to, that higher level of consciousness experience can imprint your biofield and your energy system with the ability to remember your own power, right? And so it's like, oh, this brings me back to how it's possible that I started meeting people that went off and worked with plant medicines and never went to rehab, never went to Alcoholics Anonymous or anything like that. And they were rendered sober and changed their lives, right? It's because they had that peak experience like he had. So I think why, in my case, and I should have said this disclaimer, 20 minutes ago, I'm not saying psychedelics are good for everyone in recovery or that they should do them. It might trigger someone back into their addiction. I have no idea. I can only speak from my personal experience. What happened for me was, if it was even possible for me to be more committed to my abstinence from certain substances, I became even more committed because I started to love myself even more, right? It's like, that was the whole problem, was like shame and unhealed trauma and all of the pain of those shadows that were constantly encroaching upon my awareness that I had to numb out. Like, if I'm healing all of those parts of myself, then man, the idea of drinking alcohol to check out of my life is even more far removed than it ever was. And I think that's what happened with Bill, man. He had this experience and he was like, what? Why would I ever drink again? This is amazing, So it's been, since then it's been a lot of research, a lot of development, and I'm so interested in finding ways to connect this idea of having a peak spiritual experience combined with a foundation of spiritual principles or universal laws that one can learn and apply and follow. And why I think my medicine work has been so impactful for me is because when I went into that space, I had already integrated all of these potent truths into my life. And it's still this way. So when I'm in a medicine space, it's like, I'm thinking about concepts from the 12 steps. That's what my whole life is built on, right? So it's like I'm in there going, oh, okay, yeah, it's time to surrender. Surrender is a principle that's, not from the 12 steps, but is certainly foundational to that teaching, right? So I'm turning my will over to God. In my mind, I'm doing self-inquiry. I'm taking a personal inventory in the journey. I'm looking for character defects. Ooh, yeah, I'm still a little phony over here. I'm still a little selfish over here. I'm a little materialistic over there. I have a little shame over here. Whatever it is, I'm a people pleaser, whatever. I'm ferreting that shit out. And then another principle in the steps is that you do this personal inventory, which is written on paper, and then you share it with another human being, which is step 5. And then you become willing to surrender your shortcomings to God. All of that is what I'm doing in every journey. I'm applying the 12 steps in every psychedelic experience, I mean, maybe sometimes I'm on a hike and I eat a gram of mushrooms and I'm just having fun and talking to the trees. But in a true journey with an eye mask and in a ceremony per se, I'm going inward and I'm doing that kind of work on myself. And then I'm emerging. And if there's anyone that I owe an amends to, my integration is first goddamn thing when I get out of there, find a way to make amends to those people that I have harmed, knowingly or unknowingly, except when to do so would injure them or others. And in some cases, it would do more harm to correct the error than it would to just leave it alone and accept the karma.
Yeah. 100%.
So that, my friend, is a synopsis of, a journey from addiction to recovery 2.0 in my personal experience.
Yeah, like a plant allied recovery, and I have a couple of friends up in Maine that work right in this same category, because their specialization is working with people that have been through AA, through NA, and now, just like you, are feeling a true call, right? They're not like 2 days clean, like, hey, can I get some ayahuasca? Like, they've been clean for a while, and they're just finding that there's still things that they can't seem to solve. And they're starting to get to a point where, they're like, okay, I'm not going to go back and do those things that I used to do, but I also don't want to feel like this all the time. So I'm open to whatever is going to be beneficial for me to continue loving myself to deeper degrees, coming into more alignment with my soul's purpose, and, being connected to everything around me, myself, etc. And, when you really think about it, it's kind of like this. I had this analogy kind of came to me when you were talking, where if you think about it, right? Like, it's almost like for some people, AA or NA is the route for them, right? The same way that for certain people still in this world, right? There's either you can drive with a car or you can choose to be Amish, right? And there's not one that's better than the other, right? It's just what works for each people. Now, again, people that drive cars might be like, Amish people are so stupid, they don't have electricity. But Amish people would have their own things to say about the people that have cars and everything, right? So I think at the end of the day, there's just a certain point where certain people decide, you know what, maybe it's Rumspringa time in the Amish world and I want to go try driving a car out, right? And in your case, it's like, you know what, I've done this time. I'm really grateful for my time here. I'll always have these teachings, and the most important aspects of this are really in my DNA at this point. And I'm starting to feel certain things towards this other area of life. And very similar, I don't know why I'm using an Amish thing here, but I'm just going to keep going with it. Very similar to how if you're someone who's Amish and you start using electricity and these kind of things, you can start to have an identity crisis. But at the same time, it's like, what is your reason for doing it? And is it going to be beneficial? Right? So are you just like, a glutton, and you're just like, oh, I'm on Rumspringa, so I'm just going to drive all these cars and do all this stupid shit, right? Or are you actually starting to realize, like, hey, it might actually make sense to have these certain aspects of maybe that other world? Or, for a lot of us that are living in the high tech world, maybe we want some of those more Amish things in our life, right? Communal living, homeschooling, things like that.
Low EMF.
Exactly. Low EMF.
The Amish have it figured out.
Yeah, they really do, man. They were like, nah, we're good with all that. You guys can have that. We'll see you in a couple of years when you figure it out, But at the same time, it's like, that's what I tell everyone, like, no path is objectively the best path unless subjectively it's the best for you. And what I love about your journey is that you really took the time to make sure that you knew what voice was the one in control, because when you're still in cravings and everything, and that's why I tell everyone, like, when people hit me up, and again, I work with cannabis, so mostly it's cannabis people that hit me up. And if they're in like, hey man, I'm smoking all day, every day, what do I do to start connecting intentionally? I'm like, take a 90-day break, like really let the polarity swing the other way. And then at that point, once you've been clean for 90 days, you'll have a much more awareness around what voice is which, like whether it's that voice that's trying to just get you away from your trauma. And that voice, at the end of the day, it's not objectively a bad voice. It just doesn't have the full scope of everything. Like with you, when you were doing crack and heroin, there was a part of you that was like, we just don't want you to hurt, man. So we want you to do these things, right? But that part didn't see like, well, dude, I might not hurt from trauma, but I might actually die, And so like, again, it's like we have all these parts inside of us. And this is why I love IFS so much. We have all these parts inside of us that might be like children, like they just want what they want now, but they're not aware of the long-term challenges associated with it. And it takes us becoming the father or mother figure of our own being to be able to actually discern between them and make the right choice. And that's why I love that your journey really articulates that, of you being aware enough that like, hey, right now I need complete sobriety for a long time until I really feel like I know what voice is which. And then you spent your time like really finding your foundation and creating a foundation from which you could build the skyscraper of your life. And at a certain point, you realize like, hey, you know what? Like, I feel like at this point, my foundation's really strong. I have this tower, but I'm kind of thinking I want a different design than I originally intended. Do I trust my foundation? And then what you were able to do through your own self-inquiry and through talking to Paul Selig is realize like, yes, I do trust my foundation. I'm trusting that my foundation is strong enough that no matter what this experience is, even if it was exactly what heroin was back in the day, that I'd be able to come back and realize the beauty in my life and how I don't need that anymore. And as a result, what you were able to do is surrender into that and have an experience where actually what happened was you realized, oh, wow, actually, this helps me redefine what sobriety is. Because to me, and this is the other thing that downloaded to me when you were talking, it's really interesting to think about what we think of when we think of sober. Because a lot of people think about it's just not you doing drugs, right? And this is like the idea of like,
I'm so glad you brought this out.
Yeah,
Go on.
It's like it's the idea of I don't want to be in this pain anymore versus I want to be in that pleasure, So it's very similar. Where like a lot of sobriety for a lot of people and the way they think about it is just not doing drugs. But if you're looking at what you don't want to do anymore, you're putting attention and focus where you don't want, right? And that's not efficient. So it's almost like a better definition of sobriety is you don't run from yourself anymore, And because again, that would include not drinking, not doing drugs that are going to numb you out, but it also gives way for medicines like an ayahuasca that are actually going to put you directly in contact with yourself, And in order to have that ayahuasca experience be what it was, you would have to have supplied the foundation from not running from yourself to allow you to keep not running from yourself. So it's very interesting, man. Super
One
cool.
of the words that, of course, I did a lot of research on when I was trying to tease apart, I think, here's what it is. All right, I'm 26 years old. I make the decision that I'm ready to give up everything. And as I told you earlier, quitting cannabis was by far the most terrifying because that's my best friend. The heroin and all this stuff, it's like, I'm no idiot. It's not doing me any favors, but man, smoking weed is like, no, I couldn't let it go. When I really surrendered to that nope, I'm going to have to let everything go. I woke up the first day in rehab and they instructed me to pray. And I never really prayed. I'm not religious, spiritual, any of that. I pray, and something to this day that's just unfathomable happened. I was relieved of the obsession to drink and use. All my cravings were just gone. Poof, they never came back. 27 years. I've never, ever been like, ooh, man, I'd love some Coke. Like, never. You could open a bottle of wine right here. I just look at it. It's inert, whereas before, there's no way I could let that bottle of wine sit there. I would be compelled against my own survival instinct to drink it. So 27 years for me has been like, what the fuck was that?
Yeah.
That morning when I got on my hands and knees and I prayed, something happened. What happened? And how can I invite more of that power into my life, right? So when I started researching all of these words, it was about, I want to know what happened to me. And so I need to research. It's like an investigation. So if I did that, and now you describe the state that I live in as sober, S-O-B-E-R, what does that word actually mean? So when I looked that word up, and you can go look it up right now, one of the definitions is not intoxicated. But, you know, if you go in Webster's dictionary, there'll be a number of definitions. The part that describes not being intoxicated, I think, is just that one sentence. And then it gives a number of other descriptors, such as of sound mind, clear thinking, rational mind, you know, this kind of thing. And that's when you think sober as a judge, it's not that they're not drunk, it's that they have laser sharp discernment, right? That they're tapped in. And so when I had that experience of going, oh man, am I still sober, when I'm in the peak of an ayahuasca journey, and the voice said, you have never been more sober in your whole life. It's true, because I had never been of a mind that sound. The clarity, the lack of interference from the intellect and the persona and all the programming and all that stuff was temporarily pushed to the sides, to where it really was the most sane I had ever been in my entire life. Legitimately, right? So I was the most sober. Now, could I have driven a car or passed a sobriety test? No. But in terms of the true definition of sober, of clarity of mind, of focus, of being in the fabric of objective reality and objective truth, I was right there, you know? So if we expand our understanding of even what that principle of sobriety is, then yeah, man, absolutely. For some people, medicine can be an incredible tool to bring us back into that soundness of mind, back into that clarity, to actually allow us to embody a deeper level of sanity, because we're insane in this world, individually and collectively, right? Now, the trick is, of course, in God's sense of humor, very few humans are able to maintain that sort of level of sanity in that peak state and still function, right? Because it's like, oh man, you know, you still got to drive a car and pay your bills and be a husband and a parent and all that, right? So it's like, well, of course, you can't exist in that. But I was explaining it like this yesterday, to spontaneously. It's like, if you've jumped in the pool and you go, man, being in water is everything. I need to be in here all the time. Well, if you're in the water, you can't really go walk around, and you need to walk around to be a human. So you can get out of the water and you can dry off, AKA the ayahuasca subsides, right? But you know what it's like to be totally wet. You know what it's like to swim. And you can live the rest of your life with maybe a toe in the water, like a remembrance that, oh, consciousness is so much more vast than my mind or my limited experience throughout my day-to-day life gives it credit for, right? So as we speak here now, I don't need to drink ayahuasca to have an experience of that field that's always present. My radio receiver is tuned down to a much more narrow frequency in order to be cognizant and to be able to have this dialogue with you. But there's still a big part of me now, over years of medicine work, that knows, man, there's all of that stuff is still right here. All the guides, all the entities, all the interdimensionality, the auric field, my biofield that's going out God knows how far, and it's interacting with yours. Like, I can't see it right now, but I still know it. I'm still aware of it. So I can still practice in the world and make my life a journey. I can make my life a prayer, make my life a meditation, because those peak experiences leave, boom, such an imprint that if one is lucky enough to, without attachment, grasp onto that and truly integrate it and go, okay, this right now I'm in actual reality. And then what we're in here is only a fraction of that reality. And so the trick is, in sobriety and elsewhere in life, is to build the memory that what seems real right here and things that seem important, things that seem to matter, things I'm worried about, afraid about, excited about, that those are just like a microscopic single cell in an infinite organism, you know? And so it's like there's a lightness of being, there's an ability to wear the world like a loose garment kind of thing. The fear of death, the fear of, I mean, I have shit right now. Like, it's always email for me. When I open up the email, it's like, that's where all the spooky stuff lives.
Oh God, yeah.
It's because I didn't get an email that I really wanted,
Yeah.
or I got one that I didn't want. You know, that's my interface with the outer world. Otherwise, I'm here in the house with my wife and my dog, and like, I don't have to deal with shit. It's the email is like the portal into the things that can get me afraid or anxious or get my hopes up, get excited. It's the thing, like classic, the thing outside of myself that has an impact on who I am. But because of the work I've done with medicine, it's like, wow, I can really see how I slip into having my state of emotions and the state of mind be influenced by things outside of myself that objectively don't really matter. Right. So it's like an ability to kind of play the game of being Luke Story and do the things I'm supposed to do and show up here and show up there. And it's like, I do it, I play along, but there's a much deeper understanding that I'm playing a role, right? It's like I'm playing the Luke Story character and I'm following my
Dharma.
Yeah, my Dharma. I mean, I'm following my guidance the best I can and showing up and doing your podcast and all the things I'm doing. But it's like, man, there's a very, there's a loose relationship with it all that I don't know I would have been able to achieve just by meditating more. You know, it's like there's moments of, it's like in a deep medicine space, like with something like Bufo, right? Where everything is gone, right?
You don't even know you're human. You don't know your name, nothing.
Yet there is still awareness. I mean, Bufo is a great example of that because in the peak of the moment for a few minutes there, I mean, definitely in the very peak of it, there's not even a you that's aware of the awareness, right?
Yeah.
And then as you start to kind of reemerge and cobble back together the persona and your identity, then you there's like a little intermediary place there where you're just pure awareness. When you've emerged out of the totality, you're just in awareness. You're aware that you're sitting there. You're aware that there's a you, but man, your life and your problems and the people that have died and things that you're grieving and things that you're afraid of and your traumas and your hurts and your grievances and resentments and all of that is just like, it becomes so obvious that they're all phantoms. They're all ghosts. They do not exist. They're not fucking real. And then the medicine subsides and I got to check my phone and get back in the car and I'm in traffic and then I'm back in my life. But even though I'm back in my life, you can't fool me.
Exactly.
You know, it's like
never forget.
This reality, it'll fool me for a little bit sometimes, but no. I know. I've seen that this is all a projection based on my perception because my soul as a single point of consciousness is experiencing the world through the body. And so because I'm in a body, it only believes what is perceivable. But because I've been out of body so many times and realized, okay, I'm out of my body, yet here I am. Well, who am I and where am I if I'm not in my body anymore, right? I'm still that single point of awareness that doesn't even need to have a name anymore in those cases. And then I go, well, okay, it's time to put on the Luke costume again and, you know, go back into life and then integrate. And integrate to me is like becoming integrous again, right? It's like, you get disintegrated in a journey. You're just, all your reality is blown apart in sometimes scary and sometimes beautiful ways. And then so the integration is like, how can I embody the fullness, the richness of consciousness that I just experienced? How can I, within an unattached way, but just in a gnosis, operate in my life with that same awareness, you know, to be in wholeness and integrity knowing that I'm just playing a role, that I'm playing a game, and continue to strengthen that part of myself that is the witness, that's the observer, watching me do my little thing. So as I'm talking to you, there's like an awareness I have that's like, you've been talking too long, give him a shot. Yeah. Who's that watching?
Yeah.
There's a duality, but no, it's different layers of myself, like the Russian dolls, right? Mm-hmm. It's like there's all of these different layers of oneself, and they're all important and they're all valid, and they all deserve love, and they all deserve attention, and they all deserve to be recognized as a reality. So the witness, observer, higher self, what we think of as our soul, super important and valid, but that doesn't invalidate the animal self I am that wants to eat a steak and make love to my wife and make some money or whatever, right? It's like, it doesn't have to be an either or thing. So the integration to me is like, oh, okay, so I met my soul. That shit's real. But if I was just meant to be a soul, I would have left my body and moved on and gone out to the etheric realms or wherever you go, right? But the fact is that I kept breathing, and now I'm back in my body fully. So what was the point of that? The point is that how can I be a soul and a human at the same time?
Definitely. It's like there was so many amazing things in that, bro. Like, this is absolutely amazing, man, because I've thought about this often, how like what came to me was like the idea of a movie, right? People will be able to maybe contextualize this if they have, again, most people listening to this, I'm sure, have connected with psychedelics, but like imagine a movie, right? What really allows a movie to be potentially scary? Not knowing what's going to happen, right? Why are Hallmark movies so popular, even though like they're cheesy, right? Because even if you haven't seen the movie, that it's going to end well, Movies that really capture your attention, though, are the ones that you don't know how they're going to end, and then they end well, right? And they become your favorite movie, and that's like going outside of your body and realizing, oh my God, we're infinite. Oh my God, I'm never going to die. Oh my God, like you said, I'm not in my body, but here I am, right? Yeah. So when you have that experience, you can come back in and you can smell the roses a little bit more, right? And it's very similar, like what you were talking about with your higher self and this observer point of view, and then also you. It's very similar with adults and children, right? Children will really believe the boogeyman exists, right? Which like adults will really believe that our problems are real, or that, the IRS is going to get us, or whatever the hell it is, right? But, what parents do is we don't just say, shut up, the boogeyman's not real, We actually are like, all right, where is the boogeyman? Is he under your bed? All right, let's go look, right? Let's find him together. And you show the kid, right? There's nothing to fear about, right? So it's like, that's what our soul is here for. Many different things, but of course, that's one facet of it, is these plant medicines actually are here to remind us of like, hey man, don't take it that seriously. It's just life. No one gets out alive anyway, but spoiler alert, you actually are alive forever, and you've never been born, you never die, and you're infinite. So go have fun. Now run around again and have a lot more fun, and realize what kids know when they're young enough, like when kids are like below 6 years old, they know that without actually being able to consciously know that, because they remember a lot of that because they're just hot out of the oven, As we go older, it's very easy for us to get more and more separate, and that's, I think, why right now in society, we're seeing this big call to psychedelics, this big call to traumatic work, this big call to even AA and NA, all these things, right? Because they're all looking, as our consciousness raises and we start to realize we're all one, well, of course, we're going to seek out things that create that ability for us to feel more at one with ourselves and everything that exists. Because like you said, we are just individual cells in a gigantic organism, the same way that we have millions of cells inside of us right now that are almost playing the same reality, dude, if you really think about it.
Yeah. Holographic universe, man.
Yeah, dude.
There's actually nothing different. It's a matter of scale.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything
As
is,
within, so without.
Yeah, everything is just scale. It's a great way to think about things, right? Because then it simplifies the whole game.
It does.
A lot.
It does. You can learn everything from looking at this pot that you could learn from reading any spiritual text or anything. And why would the creator make it so complicated, right? Obviously, it's not complicated. The mind makes things complicated. Like, there must be more I need to do to heal my thing, right? Or, oh my goodness, I did a substance, so I'm not sober. And then you get into the space and it's like, dude, you're actually the most sober you've ever been, man. Like, of course, that would be how the creator would build this universe, because, everything is meant to work in unison with each other. You look at animals, they're not stressed out. Like, they're not like freaking out. They're just doing their thing, because they don't have that that ego that we have. And again, it's not a bad thing that we have it. We have it for a very specific purpose too. Because I imagine anyway, I don't know for sure, but this is the downloads I've gotten, that as you decide to incarnate, right, in the physical form, and I call this my ethereal extreme sporting theory, we're basically like, imagine that you're just oneness, right? And maybe you're starting to fractalize or whatever, so you have some type of separation where you can talk to yourself. And you start seeing souls come back that are like, dude, we just tried that thing called incarnating in a physical form. Dude, it's wild. And you're like just saying no for a while. You're like, no, I don't know about that, right? But eventually you're like, all right, let me microdose it. I'm going to go down there as a fly, right? So you go down as a fly, you run around, you get smacked your back, right? And you're like, damn, that was crazy. What the hell was that? You're like, all right, I'm going to try a little bit bigger of a dose. I'm going to be a bird now. So maybe I don't know how long birds live, but like months, years, whatever. You go down there and you're like, holy shit, that was crazy, right? I flew around. I saw a lot of expansive views of the universe, or the world anyway. You come back and you're like, all right, you know what? I'm going to try a longer experience, but maybe with a less potent medicine. So I'm going to be a tortoise, right? So I got 100 years now, but I'm just kind of chilling out, just observing. It's like the ketamine of the animal world, just hanging out, very low dials on everything, just maxing and relaxing, vacation vibration. Well, eventually you start to be like, all right, you know what? I really you've done it enough times now where you're like, I want to send it, dude. Well, the ultimate sendero in the universe is to be a human. You're aware that you're aware, but you're also running all these programs and all this stuff. It gets really crazy. So what I always say is just realize to everyone that if you're a human right now, no matter how good you think you're doing or how terrible you think you are or whatever, you're still an ethereal extreme sporter. You're still an absolute sendero, right? In the terms of you chose to be a human being that's aware of this stuff, but maybe it's not true, but maybe it is too. And you got to get into all these constructs and whatnot, and then you got to break your identity and reform it and all these things. It's like, no matter what you're doing as a human being, if you chose to do this, chances are your soul is a very high level, and also at the same time, not in a hierarchical way or an egotistical way, but the fact is, if you chose to do this, you have the experience you need to be able to traverse this. You may just not consciously think. And that's why psychedelics can be so beneficial, because they help you remember, dude, you've done this hundreds, thousands, millions of times, and you are going to be okay. You're never going to die. It reminds you of all of those things. And it's the same thing that spirituality and these things can do, right? But you found, I found, for me personally, and I'm not saying this is for everyone, and I know that you wouldn't say the same thing either, but for me personally, I realize that time is the most valuable resource. I've been there wherever there is for infinity. I'm only here for a minute amount of time. So I don't want to spend any extra time than I need to. So for me, in my own subjective experience of life, it was very beneficial to connect with a medicine that, for me, quantum fucking leaped me into having that realization at a very young age, and then being able to integrate that more and more as I go. So it's been amazing, dude. I wish we could dive in a lot longer. I'm going to get you back on the podcast. I don't be riffing for 3 hours today between both of our shows, but man, where can people find you, Luke? I just want to say thank you so much for sharing so much of your experience, man. It's been amazing. I know the listeners are going to find it super beneficial. I know you got a book you're writing. I know you got tons of stuff going on. Of course, the Lifestylist podcast and all the things people should check out. We'll have it all in the show notes. But where can people find you, man, where they can tap into your whole reality and connect with you, man?
I love that. Thank you so much. And this is such a great opportunity to talk about, really, I think the thing about which I'm most passionate, is just, wow, so fascinating to be gifted such loving grace to be able to be freed from addiction. I mean, just if that's the only thing that ever happened in my life, I won the game. I mean, because the odds are stacked against you. Most of us don't make it out. So to be able to talk about that is a gift and a beautiful thing to experience. But then also, to stack on top of that, the seeming paradox of working with psychedelics. It's just wow, I never imagined that would have been something that I would experience or be able to articulate and share with people. So it's super fun. So thank you. And I feel like I only want to do podcasts talking about this. I don't really want to talk about anything else, actually. It's the only thing that's really interesting to me.
Yeah, dude. So fun, man.
But the mothership is lukestory.com. And, from there, my Instagram is @lukestory, and the podcast is called the Lifestylist Podcast. And I think that's the bulk of the content that I produce in the world that's free for all. And It's been a real gift to do that. I started it in 2016, and so it's been 8 years or something like that. And it's been beautiful to get a PhD in life, as I'm sure you experienced from being a host. It's like someone said it to me yesterday. They said, "Man, you must learn so much." I go, "You have no idea."
Yeah, I know, dude. It's a whole educational platform.
The souls I get to sit down and commune with, I mean, every week, it's just like, oh my God. I often feel like, oh, my life would have sucked if I didn't just have this conversation. I would have missed out. It's like, oh my God, if I didn't know what I just learned, it's like I would have not lived. So yeah, lukestory.com is where all my stuff exists. And to the book you mentioned, the book is in the process of being written. And the theme of the book is loneliness. So it's about the underlying causes of loneliness and the maladaptations we apply to try to solve the issue of connection, and then ultimately finding a way to live in the ways we've been talking about, where you have an awareness that there is only one thing and that you are it.
Dude, I love that, man. It's been such a pleasure, man. Let me see if I got time for one more.
Okay.
So I got one last question that I ask everyone, right?
Cool.
That comes on, which is, let's say someone listens to this episode and they feel really inspired, right, to dive into psychedelic medicines and maybe use them in their own life or utilize them in their own life. What is the one piece of advice you would suggest to them to allow them to use the proper discernment in choosing whether or not these medicines are right for them at this time in their lives?
Oh man, so important. Yeah, I usually, when I talk about this topic, especially in the context of addiction recovery, is like disclaimer after disclaimer after warning after warning after warning. I mean, I think it's one of those things that it's so individual, but based on my reckless use of psychedelics that I described earlier, maybe the most important question is why. And the second most important question is why now? Because you can come up with a pretty good why. Hey, sounds interesting. You hear two guys like us talk, you're like, shit, I want to try that. Why? That's a good why, but why now? Why this weekend? Why tonight? Why in 6 months when you have that retreat booked? It's the why. It's the intentionality behind it, the purpose of it. And, of course, the with whom is really important. And this is something I've been very fortunate. I've only had positive experiences with facilitators, but I think I have also been kind of naive because I went into the medicine space, not that I was perfect, but I wasn't someone who lied, cheated, stole, abused people, like I was pretty conscious, like walking the straight and narrow guy. So I had a framework of morality that was only concretized and refined through every journey I've ever done. I've become more integrous, more honest, more mindful about the way I treat other people and treat myself and so on. So I was kind of naively thinking that if anyone's done a bunch of psychedelics, that they're going to be a trustworthy, benevolent person. And I've learned anecdotally that is not the case. So it's really important to not give people your trust just because they have a lot of time under their belt in the psychedelic realm, or because they've led X amount of people on ceremonial experiences and so on. So I think, referrals is a really important part of vetting a facilitator, is really, talking to people firsthand about their experience to ensure that that person is of the light, that is serving love and not serving their own distortions or perversions or whatever. I mean, you hear some stories of just, I still can't believe some of the things I hear. I'm just like, how could someone have sat with ayahuasca 50 times and then still be behaving in ways that are inappropriate or abusive of other people? I just literally can't compute it.
It doesn't make sense to me either. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Because you're going to face it the next time you go into business.
I know.
Like, that is masochism to a whole new level.
I know. So that's a long way of saying it's really important to thoroughly vet the people with whom you're going to share that experience to ensure your safety and also that you're electing to be facilitated by people that are not only safe to you from themselves, but that also have some skill in keeping you safe through the different planes and dimensions that you're going to travel to be able to create a grid. I mean, this is why in the beginning I was like, what's with all the burning of Kapal and all this shit? Like, just give me the medicine.
Yeah.
And I've learned, because I actually had one journey that didn't have any of the accoutrement of ritual, and it went fine. It was a deep, long form DMT journey, and it went fine. But I did get attacked by some entities in that space, and I felt like I really held my own. I didn't feel defeated or infected at the end of it. I thought, fuck, actually, I came to the table with some real power, and I felt like nothing got on me. And in hindsight, I think I did pick up some creepy crawlies. And as hard as I fought, to keep the field clean and invoking Christ consciousness and really deep, powerful prayers. I mean, I was a warrior in that space, in kind of the Akashic Court of Record space that you go to in DMT, where you're just up there doing like timeless, soulless, boundaryless work, right? Where all is known and everyone sees everything and there's no hiding nothing. I'm in there doing battle with the dark of the dark of the dark. And I walked out and felt fine. And then in the course of the weeks after, I was a little spooked. Something was funky. And my wife did a clearing on me, and I was funny, man. She's so powerful. God bless Allison. I said, she's a shaman, and I just forget that because what I mean. It's like
you live with her.
It's like if you live with an electrician, you forget that they can change the light bulb. You know.
And women are so powerful in that space too.
So
man.
She cleared my shit, did a treatment on me, and I was good. But in hindsight, I think part of why that happened was because the lack. And these were very integrous, like beautiful people that facilitated me. It wasn't their fault. But we just forgot that step, or that's not part of their protocol, where there's really, the music and the smells and the sounds and the prayers and the intention and the ritual, making sure that the space is clear. And that was also in downtown Austin in an Airbnb, like in a funky ass like apartment, So when they say set and setting, I mean, it really is important. For me, I want to be in a space that is energetically very clean, that's also aesthetically beautiful, whether it's nature or, a retreat center that's very, very well appointed, and there's care and intentionality about the energetics of the space. They have biogeometry going. I mean, so setting, the person you're trusting, not just to trust them, but to trust their capacity in those spaces to keep you safe from those exogenous energetic forces that could, psychically attack you. It just sounds crazy to some, but it really does and can happen, especially if you carry a lot of light. It's like moths to a flame, it's really important when you're in those spaces. Even like in my case, I felt like I could very well protect myself in that space, and I thought I did. And you know what? I don't think I did.
Yeah.
Some shit still got on me.
Yeah, dude.
I don't know what it was, but I was definitely funky for a while after that, a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, maybe. So yeah, that would be my advice. Why now, with whom, where, how, those basic questions that those universal questions we ask of life, like put those under a magnifying glass and really hammer those home into your
pipe and smoke it.
Yeah. With the utmost of self-honesty, of really just, being willing to be honest with yourself. And if you can answer all of those questions, chances are you'll probably have a beneficial experience. And if you can't, then wait, they're not going anywhere. That's the thing.
Exactly.
Here in Austin, dude, I mean, it's like,
I get trip over a ketamine ceremony.
I mean, I get invites all the time, and I'm grateful for that. And dude, 99% of the time it's a pass. And it's something that's been really fun to actually develop that. And not because the people are bad or whatever. It's just, it didn't qualify to the questions that I just proposed. It's like, why? Because it's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
Why now? Well, actually, I don't really have anything going on I want to work on. With whom? Well, do I know them? No. Do I want to go through the time of researching them and vetting them? Not really. I don't have time. It's just, if I can't answer all those questions, but more than anything, what's been super fun is like being able to determine when that yes is a hell yes, and then not doubting it and following it and showing up for that damn journey. And then at the end of it, every time I'm like, yep, good job, Luke.
That was a fucking
good job, bro. I know exactly why you felt a yes. And that also helps me next time when it's a maybe or an I don't know or a no, to just respect that. And that also helps me with, integration time in between, because I'm not saying yes too often. It's pretty infrequent for me. I get the idea a lot.
Yeah.
I have a bunch of medicine in the house. I could be doing it every day. And I'm just like, I have a healthy reverence and respect for those powers, those energies that are released through those channels. And it's not something I play with at all. It's not a game. And so that has been good for me, so that I have proper breaks in between. So when I do feel a strong yes, it's like, man, I get some work done, dude. I really accomplish a lot, or a lot is accomplished for me would be a better way to say it, through my willingness. And so those are the things, man. It's not a game. It's not a game. I would close with that. It's not a game. Every once in a while it is a game, and it's fun.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's fun as hell, but it's only fun because you went through the times when it was less than fun and you were set free. And I'll say this one last thing, dude. And this is around this idea of, recreational versus intentional, right? And I used to be very kind of judgmental against recreational, because that's what I thought I did when I was an addict. Well, I had an experience a few years ago where I went up to Yosemite with my two brothers and my wife and two other friends that I really love. I mean, just people I feel so comfortable with, right? That I just trust implicitly. And we were going to do a little mushroom journey. We did kind of a little ceremony. I mean, there was some preparation, and it wasn't just like, let's eat mushrooms, But it wasn't like a ceremony.
Yeah.
We were just going to go out on the land and kind of see what happens. And dude, that day, I maybe ate, 3 grams of mushrooms or something to start. That came on. I'm out on the land. I'm just having fun. I'm laughing. And I just started eating more and more mushrooms. I don't know how much I ate. I ate a shit ton of mushrooms that day. And I have never, ever laughed that hard and that long as I did that day. And I don't know if I ever will. It was ridiculous. And what I learned was that was the ceremony I needed. That was the medicine. If you looked at that from the outside, you go, oh, that was a recreational, you're just eating mushrooms to have fun. Okay.
That's not a bad thing either. Necessarily, right? As long as you're aware,
like when you're healing from some trauma and you just cry your eyes out and you wail and you scream and you mourn and you get it out. I think that it was a purge that lasted for hours and hours, and the purge was in laughter. It was my way of crying through the suffering of my life. And I was at a point where I was able to express that suffering through just gut-busting, ridiculous laughter. I mean, I was going for out. Everyone else is inside having some soup. Yeah, and they're just looking out over the balcony. I was like, you guys, it's still going, And then I eat more. And it was just like, this is fucking amazing. And I've never done it since. I didn't become attached to that experience, but it was a great lesson. And like, man, don't judge the recreational, because sometimes we need to recreate.
Yes, recreational.
Yeah.
It's in the name.
So there you go.
Dude, Luke, this has been so amazing, man. Spoken like a true wizard. Let's do a high five. We'll close it out. Thank you, everyone, tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the show. Much love. Woof.